Let me tell you about a day that started with coffee and ended with a lesson. A real one. The kind you don't get in a classroom or from a book. The kind the open road gives you for free, whether you asked for it or not. We woke up that morning parked beside a Scottish loch so still and dark it looked like a piece of polished obsidian had been dropped between the hills. The air was cold and clean, carrying the scent of damp earth and peat smoke from a distant, unseen chimney. Tom was already up, of course. He's the morning person in this partnership, the one who greets the dawn while I'm still wrestling with the memory of a dream. The gentle hiss of the gas stove was our van's morning heartbeat, a sound more comforting to me now than any alarm clock ever was. I pushed myself up, peering out the window of our faithful van, Matilda. Mist clung to the lower slopes of the mountains, thin and white like torn gauze, promising to burn off into a brilliant day. Coffee's on, Tom's voice was a low rumble, the sound of pure contentment. He passed me a steaming mug, his hands rough from yesterday's hike, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he smiled. Morning, I mumbled, wrapping my hands around the warmth of the ceramic. Look at that view. Can you believe this is our life? He leaned against the counter, taking a sip from his own mug. I try to believe it every single day. Beats the traffic on the M25, doesn't it? It was our standard refrain, our touchstone. This life versus that one. The life of meetings, mortgages, and manicured lawns against this life of maps, mountains, and constant, exhilarating motion. For two people who had ticked past the half-century mark, we felt more alive than we had in our 20s. We had traded the illusion of security for the reality of freedom, and most days, it felt like the best deal we'd ever made. Our plan for the day was gloriously simple. We were going to follow a single-track road that wound its way north, a thin gray ribbon thrown across a vast, empty landscape of heather and rock. The map promised a ruined castle, a tiny fishing village, and not much else. It was exactly what we came for, the beautiful, profound nothingness of the Scottish Highlands. We tidied up our little home on wheels, a practice dance in a space smaller than our old walk-in wardrobe. Dishes washed and stowed, bed converted back into a sofa, maps consulted and folded. There was a rhythm to it, a comforting ritual that anchored our nomadic existence. Ready for the great unknown? Tom asked, sliding into the driver's seat. I settled in beside him, the road atlas open on my lap. As I'll ever be. It's just a scenic drive, Tom. What could possibly go wrong on a day like this? I remember saying it with a laugh, a little piece of dramatic irony for the story I didn't yet know we were living. Matilda's engine turned over with its familiar, friendly grumble. She was a 20-year-old Mercedes, built like a tank and just as graceful, but she was ours. We'd poured our savings and our hearts into converting her, and she was more than a vehicle, she was our partner in this grand adventure, our shell, our home. We pulled away from the loch, our tires crunching on the gravel, and pointed her nose north. The first hour was magic. The road climbed and fell, twisting around hillsides ablaze with purple heather. Sheep with thick, creamy fleeces and startled expressions scattered before us, their indignant bleat swallowed by the sheer scale of the landscape. We saw no other cars. It felt as if we were the only two people left in the world, driving towards the edge of it. I think this might be the most beautiful road I've ever seen, I said, my face pressed to the window like a child. Just wait, Tom replied, his focus entirely on the narrow strip of tarmac. The castle is just around this next bend, I think. And that's when it happened. It wasn't dramatic at first. Just a noise. A soft, rhythmic thump-thump-thump that seemed to be coming from deep within Matilda's bones. It wasn't a sound I recognized from her usual repertoire of groans and rattles. What was that? I asked, turning down the radio. Don't know, Tom said, his brow furrowed in concentration. The thumping grew louder, more insistent. It became a clunk, a harsh, metallic sound of protest. He eased his foot off the accelerator and Matilda shuddered violently, as if she'd been hit. Okay, pulling over, he said, his voice tight. He expertly maneuvered our wounded home into a small passing place carved out of the hillside. He cut the engine. The silence that rushed in was deafening, broken only by the wind whistling through the tall grasses. We sat there for a moment, suspended. Every long-term traveler knows this feeling. It's the icy hand that clamps around your heart when the thing you rely on most, your transport, your home, suddenly fails you. Probably just something caught underneath, Tom said, trying to sound optimistic, but I could hear the forced casualness in his tone. He slid out of his seat and disappeared under the van. I waited, chewing on my thumbnail, staring out at the indifferent beauty of the mountains. They had seemed so welcoming a moment ago, now they felt vast and intimidating. I heard some metallic banging and a few choice words that Tom usually reserves for assembling flat-pack furniture. After a few minutes, he slid back out, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. He had that look on his face. The one that says, "This is not a simple fix." "I can't see anything obvious," he said, shaking his head. "Let's try starting her again." Gently. I held my breath as he turned the key. The engine coughed, sputtered, and then a bang, a sound so final and catastrophic it made us both jump. It was like a gunshot. It was followed by a sickening grinding noise, and then, nothing. Utter, complete silence from the engine bay. Tom turned the key again. Nothing. Not a click, not a whir. Matilda was dead. The silence in the cab was thick with unspoken fear. We were miles from the village we'd been heading to, and even further from the one we'd left that morning. I pulled out my phone. No signal. Of course. Tom tried his. The same. We were completely, utterly cut off. And that's when it hit me. A wave of panic so cold and sharp it took my breath away. It started in my stomach and spread through my limbs, making them feel heavy and useless. My mind, which had been filled with thoughts of castles and scenic views, was suddenly flooded with a torrent of what-ifs. What if no one comes? What if we can't get her fixed? What if this is it? The end of the dream? I looked at my hands, resting on the useless map. They were shaking. I saw, for a fleeting, terrifying moment, my old life. The predictable comfort of it. The AA membership card in my wallet, the reliable car, the house that didn't move. In that old life, a problem like this was an inconvenience, a phone call to a man in a yellow van. Here, in the middle of this wild, beautiful nowhere, it felt like a catastrophe. Karen. Tom's voice was quiet, pulling me back from the edge. Hey. Look at me. I turned to him, and I'm sure he saw the terror in my eyes. I felt a hot sting of tears and I was furious with myself. I was supposed to be the adventurous one, the one who'd pushed for this life. And here I was, at the first real test, crumbling. We're stranded, Tom, I whispered, the words sounding small and pathetic in the vastness. He didn't tell me not to worry. He didn't offer false platitudes. He just reached over and took my hand. His grip was firm, steady. Yes, he said. We are. So, first things first. Let's have a cup of tea. It was such a ridiculously British, wonderfully Tom-like thing to say that a hysterical little laugh escaped my lips. A breakdown of epic proportions on a remote Scottish road, and his first instinct was to put the kettle on. But he was right. Panic was a luxury we couldn't afford. We needed a plan. While the water heated on our little camping stove, we got practical. We took stock of our supplies. We had enough food for 4 or 5 days, plenty of water, and a full tank of propane. We weren't going to starve. We weren't going to freeze. The immediate danger was a figment of my panicked imagination. The real problem was logistical. We sat at our little table, mugs of strong, sweet tea in hand, and looked at the map again. It was about 10 miles to the village of Invergary, where we'd been heading. It was about 15 miles back the way we came. Neither was a short stroll. "We have two options," Tom said, his voice calm and methodical. He was in problem-solving mode now, his element. "We wait for a car to pass, or one of us walks for help. We'd been on this road for over an hour and hadn't seen a single soul. Waiting could mean waiting for a very long time." "I'll walk," he said, before I could even process it. "I'll head north, towards the village. It's shorter, and there's more likely to be something there. You stay here, with Matilda. Keep the doors locked. If someone comes, you're safer in the van." The thought of him setting off alone, and of me staying here alone, sent another tremor of fear through me. But what was the alternative? We both go, and leave Matilda and all our worldly possessions unattended on the side of a road? It made no sense. His plan was the only logical one. I looked at him, my partner of 30 years. The man I'd built a life with, dismantled it, and then started building a new one on 4 wheels. I saw the quiet determination in his eyes, the resolve. And I felt a flicker of something else inside me, pushing back against the fear. Shame, maybe. Or maybe it was the first spark of resilience. He was facing this head-on. The least I could do was meet him halfway. "Okay," I said, my voice stronger now. "Okay. Let's get you ready." We filled a water bottle for him, packed some energy bars and a waterproof jacket into a small backpack. He put on his sturdy hiking boots. We stood by the van door, the wind whipping my hair across my face. The landscape was still achingly beautiful, but now it held a different quality. It was a challenge to be met, not just a picture to be admired. "Be careful," I said, my voice catching. "Always am," he smiled, giving me a quick, hard hug. "I'll find a farmer, or a phone. I'll be back with the cavalry before you know it. Probably find a pub and have a pint while I wait for the tow truck." I laughed, a real laugh this time. "You do, and you're walking back." He kissed me, then turned and started walking up the road, his back straight, his pace steady. I watched him until he was just a small figure against the immense green and brown of the hills, until the road curved and swallowed him from sight. And then, I was alone. The first 20 minutes were the worst. The silence was absolute. Every gust of wind sounded like an approaching vehicle. Every cry of a distant bird made me jump. I locked the doors and sat at the table, my heart thumping a nervous rhythm against my ribs. I felt small and vulnerable. The Karen from my old life, the one who called for roadside assistants and property managers, was screaming in my head. "What have you done? This was a mistake. You're not cut out for this." I let her scream for a while. I listened to all her fears, all her doubts. And then, I told her to be quiet. I got up and made another cup of tea. I washed the mugs from our emergency planning session. I tidied the already tidy space. I grabbed a book I'd been meaning to read for weeks. I sat in the passenger seat, put my feet up on the dashboard, and looked out at the mountains. Something shifted. The fear didn't vanish, but it receded. It became a background noise instead of the screaming foreground. I was alone, yes. I was in a broken-down van, yes. But I was also safe. I was warm. And I was surrounded by a wild, rugged beauty that was so profound it almost hurt to look at. I started to notice things I'd missed while we were driving. The way the light caught the wisps of cloud, turning them pink and gold. The subtle variations of color in the heather, from deep purple to pale lilac. A kestrel hovering on the wind, a masterpiece of effortless control. I realized this was the flip side of the freedom we craved. The freedom to see these incredible places comes with the freedom to get stuck in them. You can't have one without the other. Our old life was built on eliminating risk. We had insurance for our health, our home, our car, our teeth. We had contingency plans for our contingency plans. It was a life designed to keep the unexpected at bay. But the unexpected is where the stories are. It's where the growth happens. Staring out at that empty road, I understood that resilience wasn't about being fearless or tough or completely self-sufficient. It wasn't about being an action hero who could fix a busted transmission with a paperclip and some twine. Resilience, I thought, was about acceptance. It was about sitting in the middle of a mess, acknowledging the fear and frustration, and then taking a deep breath and doing the next logical thing. For Tom, it was walking. For me, it was waiting. It was about trusting. Trusting him, trusting that someone would eventually come along, and most of all, trusting myself to handle the solitude and the uncertainty. Hours passed. The sun reached its zenith and began its slow slide towards the west. I read. I napped. I made myself a sandwich. I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. I was okay. I could do this. I was stronger than I thought. The suburban Karen who was afraid of a tripped circuit breaker seemed like a different person, someone I used to know a long time ago. Just as I was starting to scan the horizon for any sign of Tom, I heard it. A low, agricultural rumble. It wasn't the sound of a modern car. It was something older, something more rugged. I peered down the road, the direction Tom had gone, and saw an ancient, mud-splattered Land Rover Defender bouncing its way towards me. My heart leaped into my throat. Was this help? Or something else? I stayed put, my hand on the door lock, watching as it slowed and pulled up alongside Matilda. The driver's side window was rolled down, and a weathered face topped with a tweed cap peered out. He had a magnificent white beard and eyes the color of the summer sky. He looked to be about 80 years old, and tough as the granite hills around us. He switched off his engine and the rattling ceased. "A spot, oh bother," he asked, his voice a gravelly Scottish burr. Relief washed over me in a warm wave. "You could say that," I replied, my voice a little shaky. "Our van's completely given up the ghost." He nodded slowly, surveying Matilda as if diagnosing a sick sheep. They do that. Fancy things." He opened his door and climbed out, moving with a surprising agility. "Name's Angus." "I'm Karen," I said, finally unlocking the door and stepping outside. The air felt good. "My husband, Tom, he's walked on ahead towards the village to find help." Angus squinted down the empty road. "Did he now?" "Ambitious. Well, he'll not have found a phone signal for another 5 miles. And the garage in Invergary closed in '98. My heart sank. Of course it did. "Oh. Don't you worry, lass," he said, giving me a kind, reassuring look. "This is what we call Tuesday out here. I don't have a tow rope that would shift this beast, but I know a lad in Fort William who does. And I've got a flask of tea in the cab that's a damn sight better than whatever you've been brewing." I could have hugged him. This gruff, kind stranger who had appeared out of nowhere like a Highland spirit. He radioed his friend, of course he had a radio, not a phone, and explained the situation in a rapid-fire exchange that was mostly incomprehensible to me. He finished the call and turned back to me. "Ronnie's on his way. Be a couple of hours. He'll take you and the van into town. In the meantime, we'll go and find your man before he walks all the way to Inverness." I quickly locked up Matilda, grabbed my coat, and climbed into the passenger seat of the Land Rover. The inside smelled of wet dog, engine oil, and damp wool, and it was the most welcoming place I had ever been. We rumbled off down the road in the direction Tom had gone. We found him about 3 miles further on. He was still walking with that same determined stride, but I could see the fatigue in his shoulders. When he saw the Land Rover approaching, his face was a mixture of caution and hope. When he saw me in the passenger seat, his expression bloomed into pure, unadulterated relief. Angus pulled over. "Looking for a lift, son?" he called out the window. Tom just stared at me, then at Angus, then back at me, a huge grin spreading across his face. "Karen. How on earth?" "This is Angus," I said, feeling ridiculously proud, as if I had summoned him myself. He's our rescuer. The reunion was sweet and heartfelt, right there on the side of that lonely road. Tom squeezed into the back of the Land Rover with a friendly sheepdog who licked his face enthusiastically. We drove back to Matilda, the three of us and a dog, trading stories. Angus had lived in these hills his entire life, and he spoke of the land with a deep, abiding love. Ronnie the recovery driver arrived in a truck that looked powerful enough to tow a mountain. He was cheerful and pragmatic, and within an hour, Matilda was winched up onto the flatbed, looking very sorry for herself. "Looks like a right proper job you've done on her," Ronnie commented with a grin. "Gearbox, I'm betting. We'll get her to the garage in town. You folks will need a place to stay for a night or two. Angus wouldn't hear of us getting a taxi. He insisted on driving us into Fort William himself, pointing out landmarks along the way. He dropped us at a cozy bed and breakfast, refusing any money for his time or fuel. "Just pay it forward, he said with a wink. And next time, by a Land Rover, he tipped his cap and rumbled away, leaving Tom and me standing on the pavement, blinking in the relative bustle of the town. That evening, we sat in our comfortable room, a room with solid walls and a private bathroom. It felt strange and vast after the compact efficiency of the van. Through the window, we could see the dark shape of Ben Nevis against the twilight sky. "Well," Tom said, breaking the silence. "That was an adventure." "It was something," I agreed, a smile playing on my lips. I thought about the panic I had felt, that cold, gut-wrenching fear. It seemed so distant now, like a story about someone else. "You were amazing today, Tom said, looking at me seriously. "When I left you there, I was worried. But when Angus found you, he said you were just sitting there, calm as you please, reading a book." I felt a flush of pride. "I was terrified at first, Tom. I really was. I thought we'd made a huge mistake, leaving everything behind. I felt so fragile." "We all feel like that sometimes," he said. "I know. But I sat with it. I just let myself be scared for a bit. And then, I don't know. I looked out the window. And I thought, this is it. This is part of it. The price of admission for all the beautiful sunrises and the empty roads. You have to be willing to pay with the occasional breakdown. You have to be willing to be a little bit broken down yourself." He nodded, understanding completely. "And you have to be willing to let a man named Angus with a sheepdog save you." We both laughed. The tension of the day finally dissolved, leaving behind a feeling of deep, bone-weary gratitude. The next day, the garage confirmed our fears. The gearbox had, in Ronnie's technical terms, eaten itself. It would take the better part of a week to get the parts and fix it. A week of being stationary. A week of unplanned expense. A year ago, this would have sent me into a spiral of anxiety. The disruption to the plan, the unexpected cost, the uncertainty. But standing there in the oily air of the garage, I just felt a sense of calm acceptance. "Okay," I said to the mechanic. "So we have an unexpected holiday in Fort William." And that's what we did. We explored the town. We hiked in the foothills of the great mountain. We found a pub with a roaring fire and spent an evening listening to a live folk band. We talked to people. We rested. We treated it not as a delay, but as a detour. An unplanned chapter in our story. That whole experience taught me something profound. It taught me that resilience isn't a trait you're born with. It's a muscle. And you only build it by lifting heavy things. My old life had been comfortable, but it had been weightless. It never asked anything of me that required true grit. Vanlife, on the other hand, asks something of you every day. It asks you to be adaptable, to be resourceful, to be patient. It asks you to have faith in your partner and in the kindness of strangers. And sometimes, it asks you to sit alone in a broken-down van in the middle of nowhere and find out what you're really made of. When we finally got Matilda back, her engine purring with a new, healthy rhythm, I felt a surge of affection for her so strong it surprised me. We hadn't just fixed our van. We had reaffirmed our choice. The challenges aren't a sign that you're on the wrong path. They are the path. So as we drove away from Fort William, heading back out towards the wild and the unknown, I felt different. Stronger. The mountains didn't look intimidating anymore. They looked like home. The empty roads didn't signal isolation, they signaled possibility. We know there will be other breakdowns, other challenges, other moments of fear. That's the nature of a life lived without a safety net. But now I know we can handle them. Not just because Tom is practical and I am, well, I'm learning. But because we handle them together. And because I discovered a quiet strength in myself on a lonely highland road, a resilience I never knew I had. Thanks for coming along with us for this part of the story. It wasn't the one we planned to tell, but it ended up being one of the most important. We're heading north again now, towards the islands, and we can't wait to see what's over the next hill. Until next time, keep living your own stories, 1 mile at a time.